So, I have decided to start my own TTC journey slash expat first time mom in a foreign country YouTube channel. I've never done this before and I'm super awkward, so hopefully I don't make too many faux pas in this video. But I thought that I would start out with recording my birth story for my daughter. So I had a very easy pregnancy, and I'm gonna make a separate video about it in case anyone comes across my channel who is thinking to move to Sweden to start a family, or you're moving here pregnant, or whatever. Especially if you come from the United States, because there's a lot of things that are different here compared to back home. But anyway, I'll get into that in a different video. But I moved to Sweden when I was 14 weeks pregnant and had a very, very normal, easy pregnancy. My daughter was due on September 18th of 2016, and I was completely convinced that she would come 2 to 3 weeks late. And I thought that because, first of all, I'm a first-time mom, so they always say that first-time moms' babies come later. But also my daughter was measuring 2 to 3 weeks small every week. I wasn't having any signs or symptoms of impending labor when it came down to the very end. And I know it's not an exact science, but if I took my due date and counted backward, it was like 2 to 3 weeks off of when I thought when I knew I ovulated and when we conceived. So for all those reasons, I really thought that my due date was wrong. So at 3 a.m. on Sunday, September 18th, my daughter's due date, I woke up, couldn't sleep, so I decided to call my mom back in Los Angeles. And we talked for a couple hours, and I basically told her, it's not happening today, it's not happening this week, it's probably not even going to happen next week, so, I'll keep in touch with you, but everything is fine over here, status quo. And we hung up, and I went to the bathroom. It was like 4:45 in the morning, and I, sure enough, had my bloody show. And that was the first time I had ever seen any mucus plug, blood, anything. So that happened, and I got really excited because I had read on what to expect, that they could mean that late in pregnancy that your labor could start within like 48 hours. So I was really excited about that. So I got into bed and I tried to go to sleep, and I got my first very, very, very mild contraction at 5:15 in the morning. And it just felt like, just a normal menstrual cramp just in the front. And so I'm like, oh, okay. Okay. And then 15 minutes later, I had another one. And by then, I was like, okay, I'm too excited to just lay in bed and try to sleep. So I got up and I decided to just start cleaning. And I cleaned the entire living room, the entire kitchen, scrubbed it clean. And I did that for 2 hours. I think around 7:15 my husband woke up and asked what was going on, and so I showed him the contraction timer. And I think at that point my contractions were every 8 to 12 minutes. And they weren't too painful, and they were all mostly just in the front, and they just felt like period cramps. So he was super excited though, and he was convinced that it was going to happen that day, and I'm like, I don't know, this could go on for a week, I could be feeling this. So we had some breakfast. We walked the dogs for like, I don't know, maybe like a 5K. And, you know, I mean, they weren't bad contractions, and they were very, like, not consistent. Like, some was like a full 12 minutes between, some was closer. So when we got home, we decided we would play some video games to try to take my mind off of it. So I sat on the exercise ball, and we were playing video games, and it was around 10:45 that we were having to pause the game every time I had a contraction because it hurt too much, and then I needed to like focus through it. And my husband was in charge of timing the contractions at that point, and he said that they were between 6 and 10 minutes between, and they were lasting for like 30 to 45 seconds. So we live an hour away from any hospital, but you know, particularly the one that we were going to deliver at. And so we decided, first of all, we called them and they said, you know, since you live so far away, you know, try to wait until contractions are either 5 minutes apart or the pain becomes so unbearable that you can't talk through them. Which was a hard litmus because I have a very low pain threshold, and I'm already having to like pause the video games and like breathe through these contractions. You know, they felt very painful, and by this point they had wrapped around my back. So it was like that whole very, very painful, well, for early labor, painful contraction thing. These contractions were more painful than my worst period cramps at this point. Not unbearable, not like I'm crying or anything like that, but they are definitely worse than the worst period cramps that I get. So we decide, okay, this is what we're going to do. It's 11 a.m. Let's drive into the city that the hospital is in. We had some shopping we needed to do. So we thought, let's go get something to eat and, you know, go around the stores and do some shopping and stuff. And then we'll play it by ear. We'll see what happens. So we drive in, and as we're driving, my contractions start to get fewer, longer stretches. And so we're driving over there, and I'm just like, man, like I'm gonna feel like such an idiot if, you know, this turned out to be nothing, just like, you know, prodromal, whatever. So, but we keep going. We go anyway. We go and got some. We went and got some food, and then we went to the pet store to look for some new harnesses for our dog. And that's when I had like the worst early labor contraction that I had. Like it was very, very, very. It was very painful. It was not just like a hold on, let me focus. It was like a. Like it really hurt. It was not just a cramp. It's like like stabby kind of. I don't know. I can't really explain it, but it was very, very painful. And so my husband was like, okay, we're already all the way out here. Let's just go into the hospital. We already called them and told them we were going to be kind of coming in that area. Let's go and get checked and see where we're at. So we go in. And it was noon, 12 noon exactly, so 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So it had been 7 hours and about 7 hours since the first cramp that I felt. And she checked me, and she said I was 3.5 to 4 centimeter. And I also think, and I'm not sure, but I'm also pretty sure that she swept my membranes. Now, I've never researched it. I don't know what they do when they sweep your membranes, but like when she checked my cervix to see how much I had dilated, I felt her go, like, and she even told me, like, hold on, this is gonna hurt a lot. So I don't know if that was actually part of the regular exam, but I literally felt a sweeping motion. She said she could feel the head and all this and that, and she told me that to not be surprised if my contractions got worse and more frequent, and that I'd have some bleeding. So I'm pretty sure she swept my membranes to accelerate the process. So then she told us to leave and go walk around, like go get a cup of tea or whatever, and just walk around, and then don't come back until contractions are like 3 to 4 minutes apart, or the pain is just completely unbearable that I can't cope on my own. So we went to get coffee, and my contractions were now at this point very, very, very bad. No, I shouldn't say that. Compared to what they ended up becoming, they were not very, very, very bad, but they were definitely, definitely real contractions. And like I was at the end, I think I was now into active labor, is what I'm saying. And they were more frequent. And so here's the thing, I didn't go to any birthing classes. I knew I wanted an epidural, and my goal was to get to 7 centimeters before asking for it, and I honestly thought that I could just wing it. Like, I felt like if I had gone through any sort of prep classes, it would put these ideas into my head, and I was afraid that having that knowledge of what to expect was going to make it more difficult for me than to go in just ignorantly blissful and excited to, have this life experience and just cope with it in the moment. I really, 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 really believed in myself that I could do that. Unfortunately, I didn't anticipate how truly painful it would be. And I don't want to say that to scare anyone. Like, for my second baby, I'm going to do my absolute best to go natural, and I'll explain why in a minute. But you really need to prepare your mind. Your body knows what it's doing. Pain is pain is pain. Those classes are so important, I think, because it prepares your mind. So anyway, we were at this cafe. It was Sunday afternoon. There were kids around, families and stuff, and my husband went and got us tea, and I was having these contractions, and I didn't think I was going to survive. I didn't think I was going to make it through each contraction without actually crying out, and saying I can't cope. I can't cope with this. My brain wasn't prepared, and I was caught so off guard so quickly that I started to lose it a little when we were in public. So I told him, we just need to go back to the hospital. We got to go to a safe place. I need to go somewhere where I feel comfortable, where if I need to cry or whatever, I can, and I don't need to hold it all in. So we leave, and we're walking across the parking lot. And I had an episode straight out of a movie, it feels like, where I had a contraction, and we'd just gotten to the car, and I'm leaning up against the car, just going, just breathing and holding this big old belly and crying, and the whole world disappeared. The whole entire thing. I dissolved into myself in that moment, and I don't really know what kind of noises I made, but my husband said that some guy had come out of a store running over to help us, thinking I was going to deliver right there in the parking lot. That was exciting. So anyway, we go to the hospital. It's 12:45, so an hour had passed, ish. And I was now a 4.5 to 5 centimeters. So I had gone 1 centimeter in an hour, and it was good enough for them to admit me. So they got me into the labor pool and gave me gas and air, which, for the record, I really did not like the gas and air. It didn't make me nauseous, and it was really helpful in the beginning, but towards the middle and end and the pushing phase, I started to hallucinate on it. And I don't know if it's because I was breathing so much in and or wasn't getting enough oxygen, or if actually getting into that drunken state was making me lose my ability to bear with the pain. I feel like it sort of put me in this place where I had no control, and everything was very fuzzy, and I wasn't being able to visualize the up and the down of the contraction. It was just this flat line, never gonna end, pain. But what I did love about the gas and air, and for all of you who want to go completely pain management free, I suggest you get the gas and air, not to inhale it, but to scream it into the mask. Because you literally can scream bloody murder into this mask, and it muffles and absorbs so much of the noise that you can make a full-on scene and no one really knows. So for me, like coping with pain, I really, really, really did need to cry and scream and make a big fuss. But I did not want to have to deal with worrying about people thinking I was being that woman. Even though I was being that woman, I didn't want to have like that. Like, I just didn't want to make myself so vulnerable to what I would consider a weakness, you know? I just wanted to be left alone in my little safe place to do what I needed to do to labor without being like a nuisance, I guess, to other people. So I really liked the gas and air just to scream into it. Labor pool was wonderful. I don't know why they took me out of it. I think it was because they wanted to hook me up to the monitors and like figure out what baby was doing. For my next labor, if everything goes as planned, I'm going to ask to be put back in the pool because it really was so soothing. And it's not just the heat, it's that general weightlessness you get when you're in like a body of water. It really does, like, it alleviates some of the gravity, and like a lot of the sensation you get. Maybe it's just in between my ears, I don't know, but that was my take on it. But anyway, they took me out and I labored, and I was on my knees and I was walking around my room, and my husband and I have a safe word. Anytime we're like wrestling or tickling or messing around with each other and it needs to stop, we say Oklahoma. Don't know why, but that's what we say. And I do remember that at one point I was on my knees on the floor in my hospital room, and I looked up at my husband and I yelled, Oklahoma! And he knew what that meant. It meant I needed the epidural, no more messing around. So I have no concept of time in all of this, but I would like to say like an hour before that episode happened, I was checked. It was right around after they took me out of the labor pool. So maybe it was like 3 o'clock-ish or something. And I was at like a 6.5, I think was where I was at. And then I got when I got the epidural, I think when they checked me, I was in 8 centimeters. And epidural was a breeze. Don't even worry about it. Like, have you ever, so whenever you've gotten like a vaccination, I don't know, like that annoying, like, it's annoying, okay? It's not painful. And I don't even like needles, but you don't have to worry about it. You don't see the needle. It's in your back. But the first needle, the numbing needle, that's what you actually feel. And yeah, it's fucking annoying, okay? It's the feeling of getting a shot. And yeah, I mean, I think you feel pressure. I do remember feeling like this cool, like this sensation that ice water was going straight down my back, like just on my skin, like not in my spine. Just felt like on my skin, ice water was trickling down my back. But the thing is, if you're scared to get an epidural, all you have to do to make it 100% not an issue is to just wait to the point where you would be willing to have the epidural administered in a needle through your eyeball just to be relieved of the pain. That's all you have to do. You just have to wait until the pain is bad enough. If you get it prophylactically before you're in that amount of pain, then you're just going to be thinking about it and scaring yourself, and if you're scared to get the epidural, just wait until you cannot conceive of life without it. So anyway, the only kicker is that in Sweden, apparently, when you ask for an epidural, they actually give you a spinal and not the epidural like you would get in the States, where you get the catheter and you can't feel your legs and all this and that. That's what I thought I was getting. What I ended up getting was a spinal, which is a walking epidural, which meant no catheter, which is awesome, and I was able to move around and walk, and be in any birthing position I wanted to be in, which was awesome. But it also meant I felt the entire delivery. I felt every contraction the second the baby's head started to engage and pass into the birth canal, and I felt the whole delivery, which was also awesome. And that is why my next delivery I plan to try to go natural. The contractions were epic and super, super painful, but I freaking survived a birth where I felt everything from like the bottom of my hips and down. And the epidural only worked for 60 to 90 minutes before I started to feel my contractions as her head was descending into the birth canal. So, man, I could have done it. I really could have done it. I think I could have done it. We'll see. So anyway, so that all happened. My torso completely numbed up beautifully, and I was just like on cloud 9 for about an hour, and that's when I started to feel the contractions fall into my pelvic floor, and those were so painful.
Good girl, breathe.
Oh God! Oh
Breathe.
my God, it hurts!
I know it hurts, honey.
Help! Help!
Here?
No!
No?
Help me!
What do you want?
I mean, they're just really, really painful. It felt like a baby was coming out of my body. I mean, that's what it felt like. By the way, I have the perfect way to describe labor contractions, like real active labor contractions. If you ever as a child had something called an Indian rug burn, which is when someone like takes your arm and it's like they wring it, they hold onto the skin and they wring it like you're wringing out a wash rag, that is exactly how labor contractions feel. Except that it's in your insides and it's everywhere. It's your back, it's your organs, it's everything. It's this ache. Like, have someone give you an Indian rug burn right now. Have them hold on really tight to your wrist and then twist like this. This hand goes back, this hand goes forward at the same time. You will feel a burning sensation and a really like painful stabbing, stinging sensation on your skin as it's being pulled, and you'll feel this terrible ache, like really, really deep, painful ache on the inside. And that's exactly what it feels like. So just that is how you imagine how contractions feel like. So, I went from an 8 to a 10 in an hour with the epidural, which I later found out the epidural is good sometimes because it can relax your body and you're able to like, I don't know, your body can do its thing more easily. So, when the baby came out, that sucked, but it was also, God, it was such an unbelievable experience. I only pushed for 30 minutes, and I use the term push very lightly because for the first 20 minutes I was terrified to push. I was so scared that I was going to get the baby locked into a position that like I literally couldn't handle and she'd just be stuck there. So I, for the first 20 minutes, breathed her down, and basically like I waited for my contraction to come and then to pass, and then at the very end I would give like a little bit of a push, but not much, like a like that. But otherwise I just focused on breathing and just surviving the contraction. I never pushed through a contraction. Well, I pushed through a contraction at the very end. So anyway, we got to the point where she was crowning. She was not in distress. They lost track of her heart rate though in all of this, so they put in a clip in her skull, which I really didn't want, but at the same time, this is not about me, it's about my baby's life. And so they were not in any rush to deliver her. She was like, I felt like she was like stuck in that position for a long time, but I guess maybe it wasn't that long. But the two things that my midwife did that really helped were she used a hot compress and pressed it on my perineum. And the thing that helped with that is I could focus on that soothing sensation, And it gave me a focal point. Like, okay, that's like the place I should, because everything hurts so bad, you kind of like lose track of where you want to focus your pushing and where you want to focus your efforts. So having that warmth there was like, okay, that's the bottom of my body, so that's where I'm going to focus my pushing. Also, I knew that she was covering my butthole, which was the most important thing because I stopped worrying about pooping everywhere. So I highly recommend, if you're scared of pooping, have someone just put a warm compress there, because then you know, okay, if anything happens, I don't have to worry about it like projectiling everywhere. I think I just made that word up, by the way, projectiling. The second thing she did was like, I was having issues to get my baby to crown because, like, I'd push to the point where it would burn and then I'd, like, suck her back in, you know? My baby, that is. So, my midwife wanted to help me, so she oiled up her fingers, 6 fingers, and opened my hoo ha. And it hurts just as bad as if the baby is crowning. But it was extremely helpful in the moment because I felt like I had control over that pain. I knew that anytime I felt the burning of the ring of fire, in my mind, it was because her fingers were doing it. And if I told her to stop, she could, and in my mind, that meant that pain would go away. So I stopped worrying so much about pushing my baby into a position where, like, I felt like I was being split apart. And instead, I could just think, okay, she's got her fingers in there, she tells me to push her fingers out. So anytime I push, it should theoretically mean the pain gets less, or at least it won't get any worse than what it already is. That was extremely helpful for me in that moment, and that's how I got through those last 10 minutes of pushing. But I remember finally being in such a state of delirious pain that I got to a point where I accepted the fact that there is only one way out of this. There's only one way out of this, and that is to literally make it through this pain. You know, I've got to push this baby out of me. That's the only way. And none of this pussyfooting is going to make it any easier. So if I want it to be done, I need to make it done. Now, this is where having birthing classes probably would have come in handy, because I think I could have used knowledge on how to get this done more easily, but instead I summoned the strength of 1,000 strong people. I don't know. And I pushed. And I said, to hell with the pain, bring it on. I don't care. Like, I was angry at this point. I was so angry and so tired of being in that pain that I just said, fine. And every time it hurt more and more and more and more, it just, like, fueled me. I'm like, ah, you know, I just went like full Sparta on my poor baby. And what I thought I was doing was, I thought I was pushing her head out. And I thought that once the pain stopped, then her head would be out, and then it would be like this graceful, okay, we're just gonna ease the shoulders out, the worst is over, everything is fine. So I gave that push, and man, did it hurt. Now, what I do remember is, I remember there being a break. I had no idea of what was anatomically happening to me down there. What position my baby was in. I was, like, completely inside of myself, in a very carnal space. But I do remember there being, like, a lull, and then, like, a whole nother wave hit me, and I stopped, I took a breath, and then I just pushed again. Like, I don't know if it was my body telling me to push. I don't know if it was convulsive. I don't know if I was still in that, like, mental place of, like, fuck all of this, just go and get it out. I don't know what it was. But I literally shot my baby's whole body out in 2 successive pushes. And I remember laying back and just having this overwhelming sense of relief. Like this horrible pain and weight was lifted off of me. And, they put my baby on my belly, like her head was here. It was like down here low, like at the base of my rib cage. And one thing I'll never forget was the feeling of the first time of her little fingers curling, like curling into fists on my belly. And it was the most wild moment of my life, because you have 40 whole weeks to get to know this little baby and know them from the inside out. You feel their movements every day, and you see the ultrasounds, and you hear the heartbeats, and you dream the dreams, and you watch the movies, and you know what this all culminates to. But nothing can prepare you for that feeling, at least as a first-time mom, of having the baby outside of your body and like on you, and being very, very aware that you have this independent, autonomous, like brand new human on top of you. I had feelings of like all of a sudden there being a stranger, this is no longer a part of me, this is now a person. This is not, like, in that moment they go from being a part of your body, like a third arm, something that's completely you, to something that is completely not you and completely them. And my God, is that a weird feeling. Weird in a good way. Yeah. And like you feel them moving, and you realize like she's moving on her own accord. It has nothing to do with me. It's crazy. That's a wild, wild feeling. So, anyway, in my birth plan, we asked for delayed cord clamping, and I got that and some. They delivered the placenta with it still attached to my baby. They placed the placenta in a bowl to the side of me, and it stayed attached to my baby for several hours, I think. Yeah, for like 2 hours. My baby did the breast crawl, which I didn't even know was a thing until I read about it on the Birth Project's webpage, like months after she was born, where she inched her way up and wiggled her way up to my breast. And she immediately latched, didn't need any help, it didn't hurt. She got that all going very, very effortlessly. And a couple hours later, the doctors came in, my husband cut the cord, they weighed her, and she weighed 3,098 grams, which I think is 6 pounds 11 ounces. She was 49 centimeters, which I think is 19 inches. And she was born at 8:30 p.m. on her due date. So I think it was 15 and a half hours that I was in labor from the first contraction. And I think it was like 7.5 hours of being in active labor. And one of those hours I had the epidural pain-free situation. So all in all, I would say that was not a bad situation to be in for a first-time mom. But my choice of delivery method, which was shooting her out in 2 pushes, left me with a couple tears. I had 3 tears. I don't know if they were first degree or second degree. I got stitches for all of them, but I thought they said they were first degree tears, but I've also read that first degree tears don't ever need to be stitched. So maybe they were second degree. None of it matters because two of them, the ones that went on either side of my hoo-ha, um, were a non-issue. I never felt any discomfort. Nothing ever bothered me. I did have one on my perineum, and that was extremely painful for a while. I for the first 6 weeks, like I could feel the stitches tugging there, and it was already such an inflamed and sensitive area that like having that tugging was very, very uncomfortable. But I used a numbing gel and Advil, and those helped quite a bit. Sex was very, very difficult for the first several months. I think sex stopped being painful when I was around 8 or 9 months postpartum. But again, I don't know how much of that was actually in my head and like that fear. Because, yeah, it wasn't actually real pain. It was like I felt a sensitivity there in my perineum, and it was a mixture of being very uncomfortable for me, that sensation, because it reminded me of how it felt in recovery, and also it brought back a lot of like fear in a way. Like I was so averse to feeling anything on my perineum where I had like that tight scar tissue area, that any sensation there that was beyond normal was extremely mentally uncomfortable. But that went away all on its own, and I think that just like having a gentle partner who is willing to go very, very slow and stop without question if you tell them to stop, helped. And also like frequent sex, to stretch that area out and get that scar tissue kind of more pliable. That also really helped. But other than that, oh yeah, and then I had an internal tear. And if you're watching this and if this sounds familiar, please let me know. Because as far as I know, there's only one other girl who has experienced this. But I had some sort of internal tissue tear in my pubic bone region. And it expressed itself in extreme bruising in my upper vaginal area, and the sensation of having a shard of glass shoved in me behind my like very sensitive lady bit. And I bled through that bit. Like I bled through my clitoris for 6 full weeks. I struggled to breastfeed because I couldn't sit up. I couldn't like roll to a sitting. I couldn't stand up. I couldn't sit down. Walking was very painful. Bending down and squatting was I think basically any movement of like my pelvic area was reopening this tear and causing it to bleed. I think that especially with the bruising that was there, I have a feeling that I had a lot of like blood clots, that were in there, and they were pressing on nerves in that area. And that my sensitive lady bit area was the only place for a lot of this internal bleeding to pass through. I did see a specialist about it. They told me there was nothing I could do about it, nothing they could do. I just needed to give it time, let the tear heal, and let the bruising go away on its own, which is what happened. Now here's the kicker. Every time I get my period, when I actually start menstruating, from the second I start menstruating to the second it stops, and the pain follows the flow. So like when my flow is heavier, the pain is worse. When I go down to spotting, it's barely noticeable. I have a lot of pain in my upper hoo-ha region. It feels as if how I would imagine riding a horse bareback for like 6 or 7 hours might feel in that region. Kind of like falling off a bike and like hitting your hoo-ha on like your handlebars. It's that sore. It's that painful. It's that achy. Always when I bleed. And then it goes away. I've talked to my doctors about it and they all think I'm crazy. So I'm not getting any help. And that's the one thing I'm afraid of when we try to conceive our second child, is if I have some sort of like fusion problem in my pubic area, that I could be in chronic pain my whole pregnancy. Not to mention, who knows what's going to happen during delivery. I don't know. I'm scared. So anyway, that's my birth story. And I'll try to insert pictures and video and whatnot. But Macy Elin, that's my daughter, and she will be 1 year old in 2 weeks. So it's been a whirlwind. But thank you for watching if you're still watching this, and I'll post another video some other time. Over and out.